series itself, the sponsor this year, is the RZA, the Religious Zionist of America Baltimore branch. And when I was first approached about this, Marty Cohn mentioned it to me, I immediately thought of a story that I'll in other words, what's my connection or my family's connection to the RZA? I could tell you like this. My father, of course, was in the concentration camp. Then he got out of war, and he recovered from being three-quarters dead. And then he came to America in November of '46, rather early. And by '47, he was in Baltimore. That means it takes 5 years to apply for citizen. So by 51, 52, something like that, he's already eligible to go for citizen. You all understand what I'm saying. But this was 1952, I think it was, McCarthy era, correct? The height of the Cold War. And my father born in Russia. And Jews are Jews, so somebody must, when you apply for the citizen, they give a background check, especially in those years if you came from Eastern Europe. And somebody in the show of Forest Park or TA or somewhere, I don't know what, it said like this. He says, oh, he's a communist. And he's a card-carrying communist. Came from Russia. Maybe he didn't give someone an aliyah. I don't know. You know how it goes. Anyway, our people are like that sometimes. Anyway, so I remember he told me a story. I'm telling you from memory, 40 years ago maybe, when I was a kid. And all you know is one day the FBI shows up in Shoal in Forest Park, an FBI agent, very polite guy and all this, and he says, "You're so-and-so, yeah?" And he said, well, are you a card-carrying member of the Communist Party? So my father's English wasn't perfect. Even later in life, certainly wasn't perfect in 1950. So what's a card case? He said, do you have a card that belongs to any organization? So he took out the wallet. He says, I have a card belonging to one organization, the Mizrahi, the RZA. I said, yeah, FBI agent. So what is this? Look this stuff. He says, I'm gonna not confiscate him. I'm taking it back to headquarters. And I said, go ahead. And about 4 weeks later, something like that, he gets the thing back in the mail. He gets his card back with a letter from the FBI which says, you've been cleared because we checked this against the Attorney General's list of subversive organizations. And the Mizrahi Organization of America is not on that list, right? No, because he said, is this for a foreign government or something like that? Go explain to somebody whether it's a foreign government or not. So let's put it this way. I'm not sure if I would be here or be a citizen if not for the fact that the Attorney General never heard of the Mizrahi. So I ducked the Joe McCarthy bullet. But that just goes to tell you how long ago, when people came over, especially after the war, and people before the war, and the old TA, and the old this and the other, the Mizrahi organization, especially at that time, was the most, this is interesting what I'm saying, because it's not exactly the way it is now, but at that time was the widest, the most popular, and most dynamic organization in the Orthodox community in Baltimore, Maryland. That's what it was. All the rabbis, all this, with exceptions, but, broadly speaking, and play a historic role, part of which I'm going to be speaking about tonight, part of which I'm going to be speaking about in the future. As you know, listen, nobody would be here if you're not coming from a pretty face, mine, that is. He says, we're all very interested in Israel, and anything Jewish, but in Israel this year particularly. But we're not interested in propaganda, because we can do that ourselves when we talk to others. We're interested, Zivish Zich, what really happened. Now, I can't say I know what really happened. I can give you the best shot at it. I know a little bit more than others, that's all. And by definition, it's always going to be a subjective presentation, because there is no such thing as objective. But this is, we do this because no matter what your political affiliation is currently, and whether you're in this organization in the Frum community or that organization in the Frum community, the overwhelming majority of us are like people who naturally are totally interested in what's going on in Eretz Yisrael all the time. We're all crazy, and we all go on the internet or on our Androids or something like that to find out what's happening in Israel. So this is who we are. It's one of the definitions of who we are, and that's why I'm so happy on many levels to be associated with the RZA and the Baltimore branch. As I said, with which my family, as you just saw, has been connected for so very long. Without any further ado, therefore, I'll plunge right into it. And tonight I want to be talking first of two parts. There's what you call in Israel the Aliyah, and the other one Klita. It's one thing to get people to Israel, and then another one what happens when they get there. The whole story about what happens in 49-52, 48 to 52, is a story tonight about how to get there. There's a completely different story next time. right? Don't confuse the two necessarily. It's a completely different story. What happens when they get there, okay? But the getting there itself was quite an event. It's beyond the movies, but it really happened. And what I'm interested tonight with is to start with the very beginnings of Israel, which is May 14th, 1948, and with, you're going to see in a second, Ben-Gurion giving the final clap. He said, now we're going to state of Israel. Listen closely to what I'm telling you. The first thing they did, as soon as they finished the speech, was Rabbi Maimon, who was the head of the religious Zionists, who was the head of the Mizrahi party, Rabbi Fishman, they changed the name to Maimon. In Israel, you need a book, who was who. But anyway, the fact is that he makes the Shechianu, and then, this part you're not going to see on the YouTube, then they sign it, and before they adjourn, because the whole business took an hour and a half. It was Arab Shabbos, and the Arabs were about to bomb, which they did that night, and everybody had to go home, as it were. The first thing he did was, Ben-Gurion gets up and says, we're adopting, because for the legal purposes, we're announcing that all the laws of the British Mandate are in effect, so it shouldn't be hefkerus. Somebody shouldn't be able to go and say like this, now it's Israel, so the British laws are gone, and Israel hasn't made any laws yet, so I'll steal your money, or break a law. So all the laws are in effect, except the ones we changed. There's only one we're changing right now. At this minute before we adjourn, we're abolishing the white paper. You understand what that means? Which means, legally speaking, nobody's allowed in the country. So he said, before we, just keep everything on the total legal part before we adjourn. So we're give the clap on the thing, and he says we're now obviously there are no restrictions on Jewish immigration to Israel. That is sort of like the beginning of the story. So to set the mood, let's take a look at the first item here. So you see right away that the issue of immigration, which takes place right after this. By the way, the old days, everybody put the hand on their head. Do you remember that era? Anyway, Israel was instantly faced with a kind of an existential clash between two competing dynamics. This is the Israel that emerges after 49. In May 1448, it was basically a little sliver. We did this last year, it wasn't as big as this, correct? Just to give you one example, forget the Negev at that time, and Yerushalayim was all cut off. So it's very, very small, but as we know, it's going to expand and eventually become this, which I talked about last week. And it's immediately going to be faced, as I say before, with certain cognitive dissonance and existential clash between two competing dynamics. On the one hand, Israel is a desperately poor country, and it should first consolidate its economy. Right? That's the right way, quote unquote, to do it. You develop infrastructure, you secure foreign investments, you build up what they used to call the absorptive capacity, and then, to put it in simple English, you build the houses and then you invite people to come in to have somewhere to live. Agreed? You get the food going and your agriculture organized so that there's food in the store, so people get off the boat, there's something to eat. So, first, you do first things, and then you do the other stuff. On the other hand, Israel in May 1448 had 650,000 Jews. That's all. These numbers need beefing up. They said they're going to be attacked by the Arabs, which they were instantly, as we all know. It's too small of a population. So they immediately need people to come in from that point of view. On the other hand, they don't really need them because, as I discussed last week, the new state did a pretty good job of beating the Arabs, and they got better and better as the year went on, if you want to be honest about it. Remember, for those of you who were here last time, as the year progressed, Israel built up, off this tiny population, 90,000 men and women under arms. The Arabs had nowhere near that. And so they actually didn't need, if you want to get down to it, they did need a very large population. On the other hand, there's the human emotion side of things, and they didn't want any more of the next item here. Remember this ship? Roosevelt wouldn't let it into America. You know what I'm talking about. They didn't want the homeless Jew. Right? That's not thinking with the brains, it's thinking with the heart. You understand? Why are we here? It's not just to make a country. We're not just ourselves. No more homeless Jews. This was such a part of life in the 1920s and 30s, wasn't it? I use this simply because it's a shorthand for an iconic representation of that so many Jews got killed because they had nowhere to go. So we've got to bring them in. Right? So which prevails? You know, the economist, the smart guy, will tell you, you do first things first. And he's not wrong. Would you agree with that? He's not wrong. And then the Kishkas tell you, he says, no, you bring them now. Historically, the Zionist movement had been conflicted over the question of whether all Jews everywhere should go to Israel. I know today it's kind of taken for granted after this period, and after Ben Gurion, all Jews should go to Israel. You're doing an affair if you're living in Baltimore, you're going suburban Orthodox, so on and so forth. I get it. But if you go back in the Zionist movement 100 years ago, right? 100 years ago, this was a huge debate, and it was a serious debate. And basically, it was a machlokes between these guys. Achad Ha'am, a very famous, and Chaim Weizmann, by the way, very famous saying, not every Jew should go to Palestine. You hear what I said? We want the right kind of Jew to go to Palestine. And they absolutely were the type which said, put your brain first and the heart second. As a matter of fact, they would even say, don't even bring the heart into it, because it just messes things up. Achad Ha'am was a super dry rationalist, and Weizmann was a scientist. And so, basically, we want the right kind of person to come, young, healthy, have potential to hopefully do agricultural labor, because that's part of the romance of the new Jew, who will not be some guy in Delancey Street selling off a pushcart. You know, that's all the anti-Semitism, which they bought into, and therefore they said, you're right, that's the old Jew. We will leave them back in Warsaw and in Vilna and those places to live their lives and die. The young will come and build an entirely new thing which will be clean. It'll have none of that kind of stuff. And that's how the new Israel will be built, as a model and a perfect society. It's a utopian approach, and actually it's what we call in the 20th century a eugenic approach, in which there's a certain racism. I want the right people, the right kind, and I don't want anybody over a certain age. We don't want anybody with the wrong views. We definitely don't want anybody with long beards and payas and all that. You know, they're a bummer, and all this kind of stuff. No, that's the idea, you see? And they're very strong about it. Chaim Weizmann made a very famous speech in 1927, right? It's pretty late on, in Tel Aviv, when there was a unexpectedly large immigration called the Grabski Aliyah, because the Polish finance minister Grabski came out with economic laws in Poland which put a lot of Jews out of business, and therefore a whole bunch of them, 25,000, not so many, but by the standards of that time, a whole bunch of them moved to Eretz Yisrael, to Palestine, and these Jews were all pushcart peddlers and got out of the grocery stores, what they call the petty bourgeoisie, and they all went to, not the kibbutz, they all went to Tel Aviv. And what did they do in Tel Aviv? They immediately went to set up a grocery store, a makolet, a pushcart, and all this kind of stuff. And Weizmann has a famous speech where he says, we don't want Nalevsky Street to come to Tel Aviv. If that's so, then we will give up the entire enterprise. Nalevsky Street, like Hester Street, or like Delancey Street, Canal Street, you know. And that's a powerful statement that he's making over there. Achad Ha'am was super crazy from the very beginning of his writings, that whoever thinks Palestine will hold more than 250,000 people is fantasizing and, you know, is a traitor to the Jewish people. On the other hand, Jabotinsky, who was rejected in the 1920s and 30s as a nut and was an extremist, said already in 1920 and 1921 that Zionism should advocate the Nordau plan, which was to pick all the Jews up in Europe and dump them in Israel. And he said like this, they'll sleep on the sand till they work it out. They'll sleep on the beach. That was his famous expression, right? It won't be easy, I know. And he says, I'm not making light of the obstacles, but you got to get them heck out of Europe, because the ground is burning under their feet, even though they don't know it, because sooner or later, he didn't say Hitler, because Hitler wasn't there yet, but Hitler will arise, and then it'll be too late. Now, you and I have the advantage of hindsight, so we all say, oh, they should have listened to him. But I'm just trying to show you that the attitudes towards how you should amass Aliyah and everybody should live in Israel versus not everybody in Israel was not a Pasha thing, even at the very core of the Zionist movement. All right? Now, there are two sides to this, right? I mean, obviously we think he's right, especially in light of what happened. But you hear the Vart, right? You understand what the other guys were saying as well. This is the cause, and I said this 2 years ago, I think, when we had our lecture series. This was the cause of the great tragedy, or 3 years ago, of the low Aliyah of the 1920s, which is a tragedy that will never be changed. Because in the 1920s, if you study that era a little bit closely, you'll see that they actually had the opportunity to bring in a lot of people. But the Zionist movement itself, directed primarily by Chaim Weizmann, he said the one that had all the power, said they want a Gucci Aliyah, as we would call it today. They want the right people, small amount, don't overdo it. And the British basically handed the Jewish Agency, which was the Zionist, World Zionist movement at that time, they say, you're in charge of the certificates, and you give them out and all the rest of it. And they deliberately kept it, as they used to say in German, Schein aber klein, pretty but small, meaning the right kind of people, the right, sort of population over there. So it is what it is. Obviously, the Holocaust has inclined the argument in favor of Jabotinsky. I get that, but nobody knew at that time. Schein. Then World War II comes, and then World War II is over. There's Eisenhower in the DP camp in Feldafing, by the way. That's where my father was. The Second World War left all these Jews stuck in Europe with nowhere to go. And they're all in this one, Eisenhower, who was accused in the newspapers by Truman, said he's acting anti-Semitically, so he wouldn't show he wasn't. So he went on the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time, visited a lot of shuls. That's what that's about. Anyway, no, really. Now, the post-war period, 1945, 46, 47, 48, those years are the years when the Zionist movement switched unreservedly in the other direction. Nobody said the words, but it kind of like, whoops, we were wrong. Already, as a matter of fact, in 1938, 39, 38, they were still arguing about it. Jabotinsky was pushing illegal aliyah. The Zionist movement condemned this at the time. There's actually a famous letter to Rabbi Alba Hill Silver by Ben Gurion saying you have to stop all the activities of the revisionists in this country trying to foster illegal aliyah because they're all using it against the will of the Jewish Agency, and furthermore, they're swindling the passengers and so on and so forth. But by the time the Holocaust came, obviously opinions had changed, and as a matter of fact, the Jewish Agency in general and the Zionist movement in general totally went in 100% into the illegal transportation of Jews, the Exodus, for example, right? The illegal transportation of Jews from the DP camps and communist countries, other countries, through the British blockade if they were able to do it. I found on the YouTube, you can find everything now. Let me preface this. The Zionist movement, when they decided to do this, so they did it as a movement, which means it's not just, yeah, we should do it. They actually set up an entire organization dedicated to this process. It was called the Mossad Aliyah Bet. Aliyah means going to Israel. Regular Aliyah is called Aliyah. And then Aliyah B, just means this is the one off the book, the illegal one. Because according to the British, under international law, they're not allowed to do this. But they're going to do it anyway. So they didn't simply say, let's do it. They said, let's really set up an organization. You'll see in a minute, before we start this, the Aliyah Bet, Mossad Aliyah Bet, therefore operated very heavily in the years of World War II, and especially after the Second World War. You had offices all over Europe. They're shlichim, sent from Palestine, dedicated full-time to doing this sort of thing. You're talking about an operation in which you have full-time forging of passports, bribing border guards. You'll see a little bit over here, rounding up people, which wasn't so hard in those years because there were a lot of stateless and homeless Jews, getting them through over the borders, sometimes going through the forest in the middle of the night, all that kind of bit, getting them on a boat, and then once you get them in the boat, then comes the hard part to get them through the British blockade. As 50-50, sometimes they managed to get through the British blockade, sometimes they didn't, they end up being put on Cyprus. I take it that everybody knows what I'm talking about in this audience. And so the result is that there was an entire dedicated, semi-official branch of the Zionist movement, the World Zionist movement, with a budget and personnel and all the rest of it, which was acquiring expertise as time goes on. Because like with any bureaucratic organization, if first you make your mistakes, obviously along the way, and then you figure out what works and what doesn't work. And that's what they were doing during these years. This is called in Israel the Hapala and the Bricha. Again, I take it that many people here, if not all of you, are familiar with these terms. And as I said before,
שלום, אני נחום מארץ ישראל. אנחנו נצא לדרך בעוד שעתיים ונגיע לברי. את הגבול אנחנו נעבור דרך הערים. אתם מבינים?
Nein, bitte sprich Deutsch.
Nehmt nur, was darft, כן? את המזוודות המשאית ייקח. אתם לא. ותלבשו בגדים חמים.
Okay, so you get the idea. And already, I would say starting in 1944, for example, in Romania, which was liberated relatively early by the Soviet army, if you know the history of World War II. They already took over Romania in the middle of 44, in September or something like that, of 44, whereas you know, they still had the concentration going on in Germany until April and May of 45. So in Romania, they already had this guy over here, who I spoke about in the past, I think this is one, Shaika Don, who was a parachutist, you know, Lechana Senish, you know what I'm talking about, right? The Jewish agency thought in their imagination, they're totally unrealistic, you'll drop somebody in and they'll organize Jewish resistance against the Nazis. They had no idea who they're dealing with. And as you know, Chana Senish was killed 1, 2, 3, captured and killed 1, 2, 3. And this guy, as soon as he lands in Romania in 44, the Romanian Jews like this, are you nuts? And they have to help him and hide him in a mikveh and all this kind of stuff. But it so happens, so he doesn't help anybody, he's hiding from the Germans. But relatively shortly thereafter, the Red Army comes in and liberates, as far as the Jews are concerned, from the Germans. And that he happens to be over there, and he said, okay, I can't do a Chana Senish over there, but let's organize the illegal immigration. And he starts to have a success over there with the Romanian. Why would the Romanian authorities do this? The communists had also been anti-Nazi, you understand? Many of the communist leaders themselves are Jewish, as I'm going to develop tonight. And even though, according to Hilchos Marxism, you should be totally against anybody going and being a Zionist and going there to Israel, but what the halacha tells you on the one hand in Marxism is not the same thing that a Jew, hopefully, or even a communist, if he's an idealist, will feel in 1944 when they say, look, they killed all these Jews all the way. Give them a break, right? Just give them a break. And they'll cover handling putting them on ships, and they'll do the illegal immigration stuff, and so let it happen, and he starts to get a fairly significant amount of success on a very small kind of scale. And so what I'm saying is, if you look at Europe in the post-war era, and this is the old map of Europe you and I will remember with the USSR, all the rest of it, here, all over Italy and France, later Turkey, not in Greece, but mainly in Italy and France, there will be offices and agents of the Mossad La'aliyah. They'll also be up here, where I'm doing now. See, that's the U.S. zone, the British zone. This is where they had the DP camps and things like that. Here's Austria. Also, there's an American zone, a British zone. Here's Czechoslovakia. The Czechoslovakian government at that particular time, for 3 years, 45, 46, 47, 48, was still under Masaryk and Beneš. This was liberal, pro-Jewish. You know, so they're friends of the Jewish people, friends of the Zionist movement, and therefore they said they'll cooperate, and even Poland, to tell you the truth at that time, wasn't giving them too much trouble. And you'll go over here and you'll get people like we just saw in that little dramatization, that he said, "Anachnu navor et hagvul." We have to cross the border and go down. Here's Bari. There's the port of Bari all the way at the heel of Italy, and you go from here to Israel. And, you know, other places, the French government, let's put it this way. In those years, 45 to 48, 49 even, France and Italy played ball with the Zionists. They did say, we'll help you off the books. Formally speaking, the British don't know about it, and if they do, we'll say we don't know. But Lamaisa, we'll let it happen, and it did. That's a major reason why all the people were able to get out, because you had two countries, important countries in Europe, as you see, with a huge coastline of the Mediterranean, who were willing to cooperate over here. Now, I want to make something very clear. They bring in, and you know, pictures of the Exodus movie and all that, small numbers, right? How many people they bring it all together? A ship here, a ship there. Many of them end up getting caught by the British and put in Cyprus. Couple thousand. It's all very doable. You understand what I'm saying? There's no real problems of absorption in Palestine. A boatload comes over in those years. They're Ashkenazic Jews. They come from the Holocaust. You can find them. You put this one in a kibbutz here. You put this one in a moshav here. The kids you can put in the youth aliyah. Other ones you can live with the relatives. You know what I'm saying. It's absorbable. Okay? It doesn't really present any kind of a challenge. But then, of course, comes the proclamation of the blockade of the State of Israel on May 14th, 1948. And only at the last minute, only at midnight, when the official time under the UN law was for the British to mandate, up to that last minute, this real mum's over here, what's it, Berman, had the ships there to the last possible minute. You understand? After 12 o'clock, then the British ships went away. So they didn't even get the little bit. But after 12 o'clock, they had to go away already under international law. And so, right away, it's a new reality. You don't have to hide anybody, like we were talking about a minute ago in that dramatization. It's not a matter of smuggling anybody through a blockade. Any ship that comes in now can go right to Israel. You and I are living 65 years after Israel, we take it for granted. But at that time, this was a radical chiddush. This itself was like the Mashiach time, as it were. You could come in and nobody stops you. They couldn't believe it. So, right away, the Cyprus camps, the Jews on Cyprus, which is, after all, very close to Israel, right? You know what I'm talking about, the map. So Cyprus, the Jews in Cyprus camp empty out. They're definitely, obviously, coming after 48. How many Jews were there in Cyprus at that time? I think 25, 30,000, something in that area. So, again, that's a fair amount. For a country of 650,000 people, 30,000 is not so simple, but you can eat it, right? What about the DPs? The displaced persons who are still in DP camps in the American zone, the British zone, and the other zones in Europe. The DPs, if you want to be honest about it, are the main ones responsible for Zionism's remarkable political success in 1945 to 48. We discussed that last year. Israel owes itself not to the fact that any of the statesmen of the world came to believe in Zionism, because Truman didn't and none of them did. None of them were in favor of a Jewish state as such. As a matter of fact, the opposite. It's anti-democratic. It should be a state that is not for any particular people. For the American leaders, if in those years they do agree and support, to whatever degree they support, the establishment of a state in Israel of some kind or other, it's for those poor victims of the Holocaust. Right? We really got to them. Left-wing liberal Democrat, right-wing conservative Republican, right, Truman, Hoover, you know that? Both strongly outspoken in favor of the establishment of the state for the same reason. Somebody's got to do something for those poor individuals and all they went through over there, and what are they going to do about it? This is what drove the Arabs crazy. They said, what do we got to do with this? But I'm telling you what actually happened in those years. It was not that Weizmann or Ben-Gurion convinced people about the cogency of the Zionist thesis, the way perhaps they did to Balfour or somebody like that. It's not that they showed them how the establishment of a Jewish state will help the West in the Cold War or something. That wasn't part of it at all. As a matter of fact, the Zionists like Abba Hill Silva and the others were really persona non grata at the White House and Kal Vachomer at the State Department. But what are you going to do for those poor guys and all they went through? And the movies were coming to America with the films of the crematoria and the gas chambers. You understand what I'm saying? And that's what did it. So, obviously, there are about 100,000 of them. There are even more, but not all of them want to go to Israel. About 100,000 want to go to Israel. And they're definitely coming, right? In 1948 and 49, who's not coming if not them? I mean, they're the main ones the state was created for. That's already 150,000 people. You know what I said? If you had the Cyprus, and you had the DP camps, and a little bit more, it's a country of 650,000 people. And now you're taking 150,000 people. That's already too much. What are you going to do with them? You're not going to have enough place for them, are you? I mean, be able to absorb them? But on the other hand, it's totally counterintuitive to say we're establishing Israel, but the DPs have to say, I mean, that doesn't work either. Right? So what do you do? This is what I'm telling you. This is an existential clash between two permanent existing dynamics, and it's not so easy just to say one way or the other way, but that's what's going to happen. I mean, let's face it. If there ever was a Cyprus and the displaced persons, if there ever was an issue to which the Jewish community, the Yeshiva in Palestine, is emotionally committed to, give me a break, this is going to be it. That goes without saying. And by the way, so was Truman as I told you before, and so is the Congress of the United States, who are also motivated by the fact that a lot of the congressmen figure, and I don't blame them, there's nothing wrong with that, is I guess, I don't want them to come here, to America. No. The Zionists say they want a Jewish state, that the Jews go there. What's wrong with that? I want to cooperate with them. If you look at somebody like Robert Taft, right? Great friend of the Jewish people, big friend of Israel, very important political influence, even though he's a right-wing Republican, very important influence in 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52. He just is. Does a lot of Israel. I can guarantee you, Robert Taft figures like this. Why should they come to Cleveland, Cincinnati? Let them go to Tel Aviv and Haifa. That's what it's there for. And he's not wrong. Is he wrong? Yeah, he's not wrong. And so there's no question that they're going to have to take in at least 150,000 people. That 150,000 is very difficult as far as absorption is concerned. It's a challenge, but it is doable. Why is it doable? Israel is kicking out hundreds of thousands of Arabs, so you have empty houses. It's as simple as that. 150,000 people you can manage because there's enough houses. Jaffa used to have 70,000, 80,000 Arabs. Haifa, they kicked out, it was like 50,000, 60,000 Arabs went there. They lived somewhere, right? There are others going to be Tzfat, Akko. It's just a reality. You understand? When all these Arabs, who we talked about last time, were expelled. They didn't do all of them, as I pointed out countless times, but they did plenty of them. And so you do have empty apartments. The only machlokes you're going to have is, should you give the best apartments to the veterans of the Tzahal because they just fought, and all this sort of thing, or should you give them to the brand new people coming over? But the one to get the best apartment, they get the second best apartments. I myself, my mother's side had distant relatives, not religious at all, and they happened to come at the right time in the right place. They came from Czechoslovakia in 48, and they got a house in Haifa. You understand? At that time. Later, they foolishly gave it up and left Israel, and then they came back, they didn't have it anymore. But in 48 and 49, this was still, as I say, doable. So from the economic standpoint, 150,000 was doable, and it's beneficial. Because these people, this is how the Zionists looked at it. And the Israeli people. They're like us, they're Ashkenazic, they're white. That's how they thought. You understand? They come from Europe. Many of them have education one kind or another. The ones who don't have education are educable. Right? You put them through a schooling of some kind or another, and good, more people like us. That'll help us build up the state against the Arabs and the others. This is the way they thought. It's not nice what I'm saying, but it's true. It's just a lot of racism and things like this seething and coursing through Israel, particularly in those years. And it wasn't a normal time, let's face it. The greatest cataclysm in the world had hit the Jews, and people are what they are. But immediately other factors kick in, right? I say it's doable. It's not so simple. The crazy borders require a lot of population to populate Zionist settlements. Otherwise, creeping Arab reentry and reoccupation, like through squatting, will take place in the country. So here's the map of Israel that we talked about last Motzi Shabbos. This is actually, I told you before, the map is not really accurate. It makes it look more fat here than it is. It's very skinny here, okay? And the borders are really nuts in this way. So, and immediately you can have infiltration, as they call, from the Arabs, meaning Arabs want to come back in. This area that I'm pointing to was completely empty of population at that time. So obviously, from both the Gaza Strip and from the Hebron area, they go back and forth, and they did all the time. And so right away, Ben-Gurion and the other leaders of the Jewish agency and the government say, oh no, we have to have a kibbutz here and a moshav here and here, all over the place, and especially over here, all along the borders, because otherwise it won't be ours. I'm sure many of you go to Israel fairly often. If I say Negev, Bedouins, squatting, do you know what I'm talking about? Some of you do. I was in Israel not that long ago, and last year I hope to go again in January with a trip. You go down to the Negev, and the Israelis are complaining right and left, because here's a whole little town, the Bedouins, they're Israeli citizens, they just put up a bunch of tents, they made themselves a town. It doesn't belong to them, right? Legally belongs to the Israeli government, they haven't given it to them. What are you going to do, kick them off and start a war? You understand? And so, in the end of the day, we're going to lose the Negev, unless somebody can persuade a whole bunch of Israelis to move there, which doesn't look like it's happening tomorrow. In 1948, Ben-Gurion, these guys said, oh, we can't get them there. We'll just take them and stick them here, right? Get them out of the boat and put them there. And they did. And they did. So these are called Zionist settlements, which means they're counter-economical. They make no sense from an economic point of view, but they're necessary from a political security point of view. From an Eretz Yisrael point of view, in the sense that the Arabs will come back and take this village over again. And what are you going to do? You have a war again? So if we take a bunch of people and put them there, and of course that means you're going to have housing and infrastructure and water and electricity and eventually set up businesses of one kind or another all through these areas, even though it doesn't make any economical sense, and a lot of it will go down the tubes. For perfectly understandable reasons, but on the other hand, you say all this heavy population we have, good, we'll be able to use them for our purposes. But you understand you're already introducing a certain problematic, which is going to dominate all the discussions we're going to have for the rest of this series, because you hear what I said? You decided that I should go live in there because it's good for you, so to speak. Right? You're living in an apartment in Tel Aviv. You have a gas electric, you have running water, right? Me, I should live out in a tent until they end up having running water on the outside, through a pipe, and until it gets to my house, it'll be a couple of years, and what do you do in the winter and all that? And, I should do this, you're over there, it doesn't go. But that'll be a fundamental feature of the Israeli reality. Ben-Gurion is in love with facts, as he calls them, uvdot. Facts means there's a disputed area, you put 1,000 Jews there, it's not a disputed area anymore. Could be that there are a bunch of refugees that came over just now from Romania, from Poland. It's not what they had in mind. Back in Romania, the shluchim, like the handsome guy we saw before, he says, you come to Israel, Eretz Zavas Chalav U'Dvash. Right? You come to Israel, it's a modern country. Don't you know what Tel Aviv is? Don't you know what Haifa is? Here's photographs, all the rest of it. That's not where they end up. You see? And so Ben-Gurion said, I guess, we need facts. The Galilee, the Galil. Israel occupied all the Galilee, even though half of it was supposed to go under the United Nations. The other half, 100,000 Arabs. Yes. Well, what are you going to do about that? And Ben-Gurion says, we have to have a Jewish majority. How are you going to get a Jewish majority there? People going to move from Tel Aviv from the nice apartment to go move up to a settlement over there? No, but I have a lot of people coming in all the time, and I know we can put them there. So once you have that attitude, you understand both sides, I hope, right? I mean, he's not wrong either, is he? Ben-Gurion is not wrong, but if I'm the victim, then I say, he's not wrong in the abstract. He's only wrong in the particular, right? You go, and not me. And so you end up with this kind of business. Immediately when Israel becomes state in 1948, it is the middle of the Cold War, but they also face the tantalizing prospect that there are 600,000 potential Jewish immigrants in the communist countries of Eastern Europe. Not the Soviet Union, because it's under Stalin, and under Stalin is a paradise. Anybody who even has the slightest snicker about it being a paradise is immediately shocked. But Stalin's attitude is a funny thing. Stalin's attitude is, but the newly acquired Soviet satellites, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, some degree Yugoslavia, Hungary, those countries, which we call the Eastern Bloc, remember that? Those countries had still a lot of Jews. Let's put it this way. Romania is the country in Europe which had the biggest escape from the Holocaust. There were plenty of Jews that were killed, no question about it. But I spoke about this 2 years ago. If you look at the actual facts, 50% and more of the Romanian Jews survived. So when the war was over, it's 350,000 Jews left in Romania, for a variety of reasons. But that need not detain us now. Hungary also, even though Hungary took it hard, but it's also a fact that since Hitler came in there very late, he only occupied Hungary in March 1944. He did, unfortunately, 2/3 of a job quickly in 1944 and the last months of the war in killing more than half of the Jews of Hungary. But by the time the war's over, there's 150, 160,000 Jews still left in Hungary. Poland has 3.3 million Jews. When it's all over, they have like 150, 200,000 Jews. That's nothing like 3.3. I understand that. 200,000 Jews? That's how Israel's looking at it. That's a lot of people. Okay? And Czechoslovakia has some. You get what I'm saying. There's a potential reservoir over there, and it wasn't clear what is going to be the attitude of the Soviet government as far as this group is concerned. That was, Israel wanted them badly, because again, they're Ashkenazi Jews, they look like us, all of us in Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim and Haifa, actually, we or our parents come from Vilna, from Warsaw, from Budapest, from Bucharest, and places like that. Flesh of our flesh and bone of our bone. You understand the attitudes over here, and I don't blame them. Golda Meir, at that particular time, was Israel's first minister or ambassador, if you wish, in Moscow. Actually, an ambassador came over there. She probably made a mistake. One of the problems with Golda Meir, she never ever admit she made a mistake. She made a mistake because immediately, at the very beginning, when she comes over there, she pushed the Soviet government to, let the Soviet Jews leave. This freaks out, Stalin. You understand? She simply totally misread the tea leaves. This is the period when Stalin and Molotov are still in charge. Stalin, in general, if you know the Soviet history, after 45, the last 8 years of his reign, last year of his life, went into a super dictatorial mode. Not that he lacked in any dictatorialness prior to this, but he went beyond that. Beyond that, look, he put the Soviet people through a ringer after World War II was over, and they had all suffered so much. And he cut the rations. It's incredible. To build up the A-bomb and all that defense stuff. And so she doesn't meet Stalin, or she meets Molotov. She doesn't meet Stalin. But she, is really pushing over here. She meets Mrs. Molotov, who we talked about last year. Mrs. Molotov tells her at the reception, "Ich bin jüdische Tochter." Right? She says, "I'm Jewish also," which Golda Meir said, see, there's real sympathy with us at the very highest reaches of the Kremlin. A lot of these big-time communists had Jewish wives or something like that, right? Some were even Jews themselves. She made a big mistake. She made a big mistake. Somebody overheard her, because this is Russia, told Stalin, and next thing you know, a week or two after this remark, she's gone in Siberia. You understand? That's what happened. And Molotov himself was forced to get up and say, "I condemn my wife," and all this kind of business. This is Russia. She also, for perfectly understandable reasons, misreads this. The next one. Yeah. This is a Rosh Hashanah. She's right in the middle of this crowd. This is in our Kippava street. Some of us have been maybe in Moscow. And this is a huge throng of Russian Jews. She's somewhere over. Yeah, there she is. Right there. Right? See it? But, in other words, they flood the streets. Which means Soviet Jewry did a dumb thing. But again, it's a perfectly understandable thing. Okay? And that is, they couldn't believe that Medinat Yisrael happened. I'll tell you something even more shocking. On May 14th was Friday. May 15th is Shabbos. And that Shabbos, in the shul in Moscow, which I'm sure you know anyway, if not, take it from me, every second person was a spy. Every second person. And maybe maybe both people were spies. No, but that's what it was. We can laugh, it wasn't if. And somebody from the ladies section, a guy went up there and hung down a big placard, on a big sheet, Am Yisrael Chai, right? On May 1540. It's incredible. You know what that is? That's taking your life in your hands. And you may be sure that he was found and probably shot or something. I don't know who it was. And the Soviet government wasn't even thinking that such a thing will happen, that spontaneously all the Jews will come on Rosh Hashanah. Not that Golda Meir was from Go to Shul, but now that you're in, because she wasn't, but as a demonstration of the Jewish feeling, she comes there and is mobbed, and she's telling us, look at the tremendous feelings of sympathy and what's the right word? Brotherliness and things on the part of the Soviet Jews. All these people can come to Israel, a big gavaldik, and so on and so forth. And so, she said she's drunk with success. So when she presents her credentials, here you are in the Kremlin, okay, with the Soviet official, all the rest of it. She's sure, she's going to get a big opening of the gates, and they'll let 3 million Jews out. And believe me, Ben Gurion even writes in his diary, you get 3 million Russian Jews, veterans of the Red Army, conquer the Middle East, right? Then bust them. No. Right? No. They're not going to let one out. How many Jews are let out of the Soviet Union 48 to 52? One. Right? Who didn't have a hand. That's the story. And so you're not going to get the 3 million Jews in Russia. On the other hand, is a different story in the communist satellites, as I just told you before. It's Poland, it's Czechoslovakia, it's Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and to a degree Yugoslavia is under Tito. Here you had more than 500,000 Jews, actually about 600,000 Jews, as I told you before. That's a big group. And here you have a weird situation in the late 1940s. And that has to do with Stalin, how he operated, all the rest of it. All these countries are run by Jews. Right? They said, what are you talking about? Huh? I assure you, just on your history. Let's go to the next one. He was the dictator of Hungary under Stalin. He was the head of the secret police, the real dictator in Poland. Right? She's the foreign minister and the main person in the government in Romania. Her father was a sheikhet, right? Father, she arranged early on in 1948, her father and brother can go to Israel. You understand? Brother was in the Mizrahi, the from guy. And he is the main guy in Czechoslovakia. Okay? One is the prime minister, one is the head of the secret police, another is a minister of interior. That's how the Russians operate. Stalin, on purpose, took these Jewish communists who were sworn communists. Look, you wouldn't rise under Stalin if you weren't Eved Avodim. If you really, as they say over here, they're willing to shoot your mother, right? And some of them did. That's that's who it was. And he puts them in charge of the countries, knowing full well the Polacks are going to hate this guy, the Hungarians are going to hate this guy, the Romanians are going to hate that lady, and so forth. Good. Then they're on my side, because if I let go of them, they'll be torn to bits by the people. They'll do my bidding. Look how clever he was in a fiendish way. And there you had it. Now, eventually, when the 50s come around, these guys are removed in favor of, shall I say, Gentiles. And it's a very popular move in the different countries, each one in its own year. Okay? Just to give you an example, Poland had a big uprising in 1956 to get rid of these guys and replace them with Gomulka, whose wife was Jewish, but he was a total Gentile. And things like that. So you have, even within communism, which is supposed to be free of all religion and racial prejudice, it's just a question of class over not religion, but that's a lie, of course, as we know. So anyway, very interesting situation. Are these guys going to let the Jews out to go to Israel in 1948, 49, 50, and so forth? Or are they not? It could go one way, it could go another way. On the one hand, it's a Marxism that's totally opposite of what you believe. On the other hand, her brother's a sheikhet, like I said, her father's a sheikhet. Her nephew wants to go to Israel. They understand. They understand. And so it's a very tricky kind of business. Some of these guys are real schmoes, but some of them aren't. Like I told you before, even Molotov and his wife killed millions of people as part of Stalin's purges. You don't know how people really operate deep down. Stalin, as I told you, used them very craftily. They know themselves that they're hated by the peoples. Look, I'm sorry to say this. These are the guys who run the concentration camps under the Soviets in these different countries. They run the torture chambers of secret police. It is what it is. I bet you don't know this. There was a guy, Solomon Morel, in Poland, that he ran all the super tortures of Poles in 1945 to 50, 55, those years, under the Stalin years, up to 53. And he did terrible things over there. I'm not going to make you throw up by telling you all the tortures they did, but you understand who we're dealing with. And then he's out, but he lives in communist Poland till communism falls in 1990. And then they want to have him as a war criminal. And he goes to Israel, to Tel Aviv. And Poland wants to extradite him. And Israel behaves towards Poland the way West Germany used to behave toward Israel. He's old, his statute of limitations, this reason, that reason, and the Poles don't push it, because in the 1990s, Poland's not sure how much they can get away with, and so he eventually dies in 2005 in Tel Aviv. You see? So it's a funny world out there, as I say. Now, therefore you have hardened criminals and torture experts who have sympathy sometimes for the survivors of the Shoah. It's funny. Plus, the communist countries are always harder for dollars. You tell me what a Stalinist economy is like in terms of whether it's an actually working economy or not. Okay? Talking about production and talking about efficiency of economic situation. It's the opposite of that. We all know it, right? These are police states. The economies don't really work. And therefore, actual real money they don't have, especially in those years. And so any way that you can get money for, dollars, is something that everybody's going to be interested in. It's also true, just a basic fact of life, that existentially, objectively, as soon as Jews leave these communist countries, you have economic displacement and ethnic cleansing. For example, Bulgaria, just one example of many, Bulgaria has a lot of national minorities. They have Turks, they have Muslims, they have this, that, and the other, and Jews. And now, miraculously, it's like somebody saying like this, to go tell an anti-Semite, all Jews want to move to Israel. All the blacks want to move to Africa. That's how they look at it. So they say, great, it's actually a plus for us to get rid of all these Jews. Yeah. Poland feels that way. For them, for the Poles, 200,000 Jews is 200,000 too many. 2 Jews is enough, not 200,000. I mean, you know you're dealing with over here. Look, was there or was there not a severe pogrom in 1946 after the Holocaust was over and killed some Poland? You know that. Why? Nobody was left. No, whoever's left, too much. You see? So this is a nice, civilized way. You're going back to classic Zionism. It's like Theodor Herzl. You don't want them, we want them, we'll take them out. Right? And in addition to that, every time a Jewish family leaves, it's another apartment. It's a car. It's a this. It's a fact. Right? In other words, you have economic displacement and you have ethnic cleansing. The Jew had a job. Now, someone who's not Jew will get the job. True or not? This guy had a job in the post office. He got a job as a doctor. He had a job in the government ministry. Whatever it is. That's one less. You don't lose by letting these people go. It's the opposite. And so, believe me, for the Romanian government in those years, in the late 40s, there was a big plus. There were a lot of houses and things that the Romanians who are not Jewish took over from the Jews who are leaving. And the Communist Party gets to decide who to give it out to. It's even better. So everything's great. The result is that as soon as Israel becomes a state, the Mossad al-Yabet, agents now of Zionism, or if you wish, of the Israeli government, it's a little bit confusing, we'll talk about in a second, they go from country to country all throughout Eastern Europe, one after another. And you have to learn the ropes, how it works in the communist country. And you have to find this Jewish guy who knows that guy, who knows this guy, who knows somebody who works in this ministry, who can eventually get you this ministry, to get to the right person at the top. The person at the top might be the prime minister of the country. The person at the top might not be. The person at the top might be somebody who works in the secret police ministry, who actually is the real one running the country. You understand? Or is in charge of the Jewish thing, which is all they care about. You see? And so it's a mini-series, as I always like to say. You know, Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Bulgaria. This is how it goes. And at the end of the day, bribery, good old bribery. I mean, that's what, you get nothing for nothing. Right? You have nothing for nothing. So any communist they're going to, it's going to be, I'll take it in 20s. I mean, that's the bottom. But it's true. It's true. You can't imagine any shaliach, eminent emissary, getting anywhere in any country, even if they sympathize with you. This is the best case scenario. Even if they're willing to let you go, sooner or later, you're going to have to walk into a hotel room somewhere with a suitcase. Right? That's how it goes in these countries. Maybe that's how it goes in this country. But that's how it goes not in the state of Maryland, we're very honest, but and sometimes you have the most amazing adventures. I told you this story last year, but I'm trusting and nobody remembers it. And it's amazing. He wrote a book, Blind Jump, which everybody should read. He's a Romanian Jew. He made Aliyah to Israel in the late 30s, like that. He was a strong guy, worked in the docks or steel factory in Haifa, whatever, something like that. And they parachute him in, and, as I told you, in 44, and he stays there working for the Jewish people, so to speak, and trial and error. He's in Romania, then he goes to Bulgaria, across the border, across this country, and eventually he gets arrested crossing the border into Yugoslavia. This is like in 1947, I think it was, 46, 47. And listen, Tito, all these communist countries, you get arrested, you're a foreigner, it's not a pretty picture. And he gets hauled in front. It's an amazing story. He gets hauled in front of the head of the Gestapo. The chief of the Yugoslavian secret police. It was a general. You understand? Not Jewish, of course. And he said, we're going to torture the truth out. You might as well come out and tell the truth. And he said, I guess, if that's the story, then I will tell the truth. And the hell with it. He said, I'm not working for he said, you're working for the CIA, you're working for the British. He said, I'm not working for the British, I'm not working for the French, I'm working for the Jewish people, I'm from Palestine, we're trying to get Jews the heck out of there. In Yugoslavia, because you fought the Nazis, what they did to the Jews, all the rest of it, and now you can shoot me if you want, that's who it is. I'm not afraid, I feel good telling you the truth. And the general, who was a torturer, a lot of people, all the rest of it, he sits there for a minute or two, and then he opens up the drawer, and he takes out something and he fills it out, this and this and this, takes a minute, and he said like this is a Yugoslavian diplomatic passport. I'm giving this to you in your name, and now you can go anywhere in the Iron Curtain, nobody will bother you. And he did. He didn't have any trouble going from country to country, because now he works over there. Now, who would figure this guy's a guy? Now, the truth is like this. If you know who Yugoslavia is, if you know the Serbs fought the Germans like crazy. The Serbs actually were friends of the Jews. Is that true? The Serbs in Eastern European politics were liberal towards the Jews. There were areas of Hungary that were added to Yugoslavia, Serbia, after the First World War, like Temesvar and places like that. And the Hungarian population sometimes would make pogroms against them, but the Serbians, in fact, I spoke to somebody in Israel about this not that long ago. He was an old man from that part of Hungary, and he said, oh, the Yugoslavians send an army there, and kill the pogromists, it happens to be that way. Now, on the other hand, if you're in the wrong ethnicity in Serbia, like, a couple of years ago, they did mass murders and ethnic cleansing. But I'm talking about Jewish people, I'm talking about 1946. And so this guy's able to go for the next 30 years. After that, actually closer to 40 years, and back and forth to Romania and all these other countries with a total diplomatic, kind of situation. And that's one of many cases that these agents of the Mossad La'aliyah end up encountering. You understand? It's amazing. You come with money, you come with this. By the way, he was asked later on by Tito, can you help us ease the American blockade in 1949, 1950? And he does go to Washington and try to help him out. Because he's like this, they did me a favor, I want to help him out a favor. You understand? This is not like a one-way street. In Poland, the head of the secret police is this guy, Jacob Berman. He's the terrible guy. But he's got a brother, Adolf Berman. Both of them started as socialists. He went left, and he became a communist. He ends up in 48, starting to rethink this communism business, and he ends up concluding, maybe the Zionists are right. And make a long story short, he moves to Israel in 48 and becomes a Chaver Knesset from the Mapam. So now, I can't make this up. I could, but I'm not. So you understand how, from Israel's point of view, right? The guy who's the real boss of everything in Poland, because the prime minister doesn't count, he's the one that counts, right? He's the one who has a direct phone line to Stalin. I mean that, red phone to Stalin. So the guy over here, his brother is in the Knesset, right? So you can already understand to say that he might tell him like this, I'm on your side, go to this guy, pay this guy 20 grand, pay this guy 500, I'll pay this guy this, that, and the other. And it happens that way. And so the Polish government lets the Jews out, they don't even charge a lot. They don't charge a lot. Romania charges a lot. Okay? As a matter of fact, the first one who succeeded was the Sheikh Adan I showed you before. He goes to Bulgaria right after Israel becomes a state. That's the country next to, they're all next to each other, right next to Romania. He goes to Bulgaria. The Bulgarians say like this, he says, we are totally sympathetic with the freedom struggle of the Jewish people over there, $50 a head. Right? Romania says $100 a head. Right? And because Israel delays, it's $200 a head, and after a while they want $1,000 a head, and then Israel has to Jew them down to $400 a head. This is what it is. So it sounds like it would be funny, except that you're dealing with human lives over here, and it wasn't funny. Who's coming up with this money? Who's coming with the money? Israel doesn't have the money. Who's coming with the money? The joint. Right? The Joint Distribution Committee. No, the American Jews, right? It's not so simple. Where's the money going? The money's going to an organization called the Mossad La'aliyah. Who's in charge of that? They're in charge of themselves. What are they doing with the money? Don't ask any questions. Since that's the system, let's put it this way. Not all the money ends up going to the communists, right? And these guys, after they finish the Mossad La'aliyah business, take the money that they've squirreled away extra, and they start something called SIM, the Israeli shipping lines. It says that they're still there today. So nothing is perfect in the world. People are people, they are what they are. But on the other hand, the glass is half full also, you can't deny that. Right? Oh, I'm just giving you a little bit. There's a lot more dirt in all this, but I don't want to overdo it. The Slansky is the communist boss, the guy behind the power in Czechoslovakia. He really says like this. He says, listen, many Jews in this country are assimilated, But some aren't. Anybody's not assimilated, go take them. You can take them all, but I'm just telling you right now, at least 50% aren't going to go because they're just assimilated, which was exactly true. It's about 25,000 go, and the other 20,000 want to stay. They want to stay. You see? They were stupid, but they want to stay. At that time, it's 48. The communists have just taken over. A lot of them are idealists. Take them a couple years to realize what's really going on, and that's how it goes. Stalin will, let's go back 1 second. It's very famous. In 1952, we'll talk about this later, Stalin will have a famous show trial in which he'll be shot as a Zionist agent who's a secret spy for the joint. And you understand how this comes up, right? And according to Stalin, the joint is a CIA type cover and all this kind of business, and it is what it is. So he's an anti-Jew, as it were, who does something for the Jewish people and dies, though he didn't want it, he dies a martyr for the Jewish people, even though he would never view himself that way. Rákosi, the head of Hungary, was a real cholera. I mean, he really tortured, did a lot of people, and super hated all the rest of it. Rákosi says like this. He says, first of all, it's 1,000 a head. You know, like I told you before, talking money. This is Hungary after all. Second of all, I don't feel comfortable doing this because then the Goyim will say, this is what he says, the Goyim will say, how come you're letting the Jews out? Why do you let us out? It's like old Bob Hope joke, you know. The last guy in the country turned out the lights, right? I mean, well, Hungarian wants to stay under the communists, you see? And so they have to say, well, we won't do it publicly, we'll do it privately, this and the other. Hungary, because of the particular Hungarian Jewish culture, there's a lot of assimilated Jews in Hungary as well. The government itself can't make up its mind. So they'll let out several tens of thousands. A lot more will stay. Hungary will have the largest Jewish community. Still does, behind, quote unquote, behind the Iron Curtain. It's a strange kind of story, but even a guy like him, for the right price, and if you tug at the heartstrings in the right way, is willing to let them go out of there. It's very interesting, by the way. Hungary is a super communist state. Rákosi is super hated. I mean, I don't blame them. The head of the secret police under him is another Jew who's even Garo or something like that. It's even worse. You know, Hungary in 1956, you'll remember this, has an uprising. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Right? If you want to be perfectly honest about it and not politically correct, the Hungarian uprising was not so much against the communists, against the Jews. You see, there was a lot of anti-Semitism, which I don't blame them, going what they went into, that they're coming out, they didn't want to kill all these Jews and things like because they associated with the Hungarian police. A communist is someone who's completely divorced himself from Judaism. Yes and no. There's a famous in the Igros Moshe, Moshe Feinstein's response to Shalos and Shuvas. You all recognize the pictures here. Maybe you don't know the Dayan Weiss, the Minchas Yitzhak, famous from Manchester and later in Yerushalayim, and originally in Grossvardain in Hungary, in Romania. Moshe Feinstein has a famous question, what if you have an Aguna type situation in which they were married in Russia or one of the communist countries? And he said, forget it, you know, it's a joke. You understand what I'm saying? He's trying to be lenient. There's a husband and wife, Jewish, and they were married under the communists, and now they come somewhere else, and she gets remarried without a get, or something of that nature. So that's a big problem. So he says, no, it isn't, because a marriage by a communist is nothing. You sign a paper, you're married. You sign another paper, you're divorced. The Jewish law doesn't recognize this, and therefore she wasn't married in the first place, and don't worry about it. And he very famously objected. He said, I myself was a rabbi, Orthodox obviously, in Hungary, Romania, under the communists in the late 40s, and there are many members and big shots in the Communist Party that in the daytime they got a communist marriage, and night secretly they came to me get chuppah kedushin. Right? You're doing a sin against the communists? Go figure. Life is much more interesting and much more complex than the rules, the official rules would lead you to believe. In the end, let's put it this way. In the end, in the years 48 to 52, 250,000 Jews get out. Between Romania and Hungary and Poland and Czechoslovakia and so on and so forth. So, hold on, my friends. It's 150 that came in from Cyprus and the DP camps. It's 250. You're talking about 400,000 people. How can a country of 650,000 people handle 400,000 people? Where are you going to? That you definitely don't have houses for. That you don't have food for. Where are you going to stick them in schools, et cetera, et cetera? You understand? No, it's just not doable. If Israel was a billionaires, so with money you can do anything. But Israel doesn't have billionaires. They're a poor country. The honest truth is, and we're sorry to say this, probably true even today, Israel today at this moment, maybe I'm wrong today, but maybe not. Israel this minute can't survive unless they get money in from American Jewry and things like that around the world. Certainly until recently. You know this like I know this. Israel needs the money from abroad. And so in those days, they were poor, poor, poor. Their mamish need the money from abroad. And now you're undertaking, as I say before, a very expensive enterprise for a very poor country. How can this work? But they did it anyway. This shows you that economics was tossed out the window, and a maximalist aliyah consensus dominated the political culture in Israel. You see? People at that time, there were exceptions, but the broad political consensus was, we go for the heart. You see? These are Jews that can get out now. The attitude, perfectly understandable, is, who knows if the Russians will let them go tomorrow? It's like 1939. The hell with the klita process. You know, we'll figure out what to do when they get over here. It won't be easy, but let them sleep on the ground, you know. But at least get out of Russia, get out of Czechoslovakia, get out of Poland, Romania, and these other countries, because if they close the gates, they're trapped and they're doomed, and who knows? And to be perfectly honest, today we know, Stalin in 1953, just before he died, was planning to make another Holocaust. Is that true or not? He was going to make another Holocaust. Fortunately, he got a stroke and dropped dead, and Purim. But that's the only thing. If he would live another year, it would not be a pretty picture. And so these guys were not exactly wrong. You don't have food? Well, figure something out. You don't have, any kind of infrastructure? We'll figure something out. If only, this was what they wrote in the papers, if only in 1939, who had a Jewish state, the 6 million would come over here, they'd be glad to sleep on the streets. True? So that's how it goes. It's also true, by the way, that the entire Zionist leadership, maybe with one exception, the one I'm about to show you, was blithely unaware and not interested in the science of economics. You understand? Ben Gurion never bounced a checkbook in his life. I don't think he ever saw a check. And for most of his life, probably never saw money. He had people to take care of it for him. First his wife and later his aides. This is true of the vast majority of the leadership over there. None of these guys had college education. They all came to Israel. They started working on the kibbutz or in the hard way, and they worked themselves up in the movement. There's very few exceptions to what I'm talking about. None of them had real business experience. It is what it is. And so you say economically it can't work, all the rest of it. They very much had the attitude in those days, the economists, Well, Ben Gurion always used to say, I guess, you can't be a realist unless you believe in miracles. You heard that expression before. That's a cute expression, but it doesn't quite work with your bank account. You might want to tell that to your bank. And they say, I can't believe we have some problems in your balance. It can't be a realist unless you believe in miracles. Can't do that. He was the poor guy, Johnny on the spot. Eliezer Kaplan was, until 52, the finance minister, Sar Otsar, guy from Minsk. He didn't have much business experience, to be perfectly honest. He rose into the community, became, had a little bit over there, and he can't be the one who says, we can't do this. And so the result is he just says, Nebuch, I got to go round up more money, which he wasn't able to do, not enough. And so the economic voices are not the dominant ones. Now, they will become in 1952. I don't mind jumping ahead in the story, and I'll tell you, by 1952, he says, we're drowning, we're going to go under very soon, and they were. I mean, bankrupt is not funny. But not for a country. It's not funny. What do you do? And they'll have to do what they call the NEP, the New Economic Policy, in early of 52, one of whose main pieces is stop the Aliyah. At least for now. We can't do it. And there was a big meeting in the cabinet, they argued over the rest of it, and like a week later he had a heart attack and died. You see, it was a very tense period. But you understand both sides. Finally, very powerful mode over here is Messianism, Mashiachiyut. People really felt, and he pushed this, he felt also, right? Ben Gurion talked that kind of language all the time. The establishment of Israel is it's like blowing the great trumpet. And raise the flag, right? To bring in all the kibbutz galiyot, as they used to call it in Israel. Bring them from all over the world. And that's what we're here for. Now, like I say before, I sympathize with that too, right? Everybody does. But you hear, I could juxtapose the picture of Ben Gurion with the picture of Eliezer Kaplan, and then you see the two sides, right? Actually, what it involves is one guy doesn't have to pay the bill. Right? The other guy is the finance minister. His job is to pay the bill. I get it. But this is the power of the sitter. Every Jew in Israel, even if they weren't religious at that time, is still through centuries and centuries, it's just like a powerful, and it is a powerful thing. I'm not knocking it. Messianism was intensified by the appointment of this guy, Yitzchak Raphael, from the Mizrahi, Vapol Mizrahi, to be the official in charge of bringing all the Jews in. Here we have Israeli politics. I know you'd be shocked to hear this, but you have Israeli politics. Let's go to the next one for a second. Yeah. Here's Ben Gurion's first cabinet, right? There's Rabbi Maimon, there's the Aguda, Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Levin from the Aguda. Here's also from the, the Moshe Chaim Shabir from the Mizrahi. Here's Golda Meir from the Mapai, etc., etc. What is this, a dozen people, something like that? It's not enough jobs. You got too many politicians. What are you going to do with them? So they said like this, we're not going to get rid of the Jewish agency, the Sachnut. Ben Gurion in the beginning, they said like this, once you have Israel, what do you need a Sachnut for? You need a Jewish agency, which is true. Efficiency and good administration means you get rid of what you don't need. Would you agree with that? You consolidate the kind of things that politicians are promising to do all the time? Well, yeah, that's a good idea, but Shmerel needs a job. And so does Beryl. And so does Yankel. You understand? And, I only have 12 things, and I can't give them all out to party members. And so, if we have, in addition to the cabinet, we have another group of 12 or 20. Now listen, before we make fun of this, the United States of America was run exactly this way for the first century, until they did civil service reform, and even then it took them another 40 years. Used to be, I'm sure if you know anything about American history, you'll know, that long ago, for example, in the time of Abraham Lincoln, every time a president was elected, they fired the federal government, and they hired all over again. Is that true or not? That's why people fought so hard in the election process, because there was a job. Who's the postmaster? All the postmasters were fired, and then was made. Who's in the customs house in Baltimore, in New York, in Savannah, and all these places? They're all fired, and new ones are put in. They even called it the spoils system. You remember that from elementary school, don't you? Right? William Marcy said, to the victor belongs the spoils. He meant they fired masses of people. After all, why do people work very hard in campaign? There's a few Meshuggah idealists out there, but most people, thank God, are not idealists. If people are working very hard for Obama or very hard for Romney, each one figures it's going to be somehow in their pocket. You see? And those are very direct. So in Israel in 48, there's not a big economy. Where do you get the jobs? Is it going to be government? Is it a public job? That's how it goes. If the government, where is the government? The government only has a few jobs. The cabinet itself was small, and the government itself was just the beginning of the hiring, and they didn't have endless money either. But the Sachnut, the Jewish agency, has a different budget. They get their money from overseas. It's a lot of extra jobs over there. If I have people in my political party, I can stick them over here and there and the other place. This is how the system worked, for better or worse. I know you're shocked to hear about party politics in Israel, but it'll turn out to be sort of like the underside of the Aliyah story. Rabbi, the Yitzchak Raphael I just showed you before was his son-in-law. So in other words, who's Ben Gurion's best friend, and it's the old system of protexia, as they say over there. Yitzchak Raphael, very interesting guy. Rabbi Maimon was the founder of the Mizrahi. Here we have the religious Zionists of America. Rabbi Maimon is the founder of the Mizrahi movement, and he it's one who said, "V'haftas haMedina b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol modecha ad shenotel es nafshecha." I mean, he was super doing, and he's the one who said you have to say Shechianu with a bracha and all, the whole business. He was the super duper Zionist. Although it's funny, his grandson was the other guy's son. He used to go Shila Raphael. Some of us may remember him. It was a very prominent rabbi in Israel. He died young from the cancer, unfortunately. Shila Raphael was raised by the grandfather, and he sent him off to yeshivas. The parents wanted him to go to Bar Ilan or Hebrew U, something like this, and he ended up going to Kol Torah and all the rest of it. So, and Chevron. And it's really funny because when Shila Raphael graduated, is that the right expression? At a certain point in his life, he wanted to become the rabbi of Kiryat Moshe. I'm talking about this in the Mizrahi neighborhood in Eretz Yisrael. Whenever I go for a conference at the Hebrew, they always put a hotel right near Kiryat Moshe. Very nice neighborhood. And there's a big shul there, Yitzchak, and they said, we can't take it because he didn't serve in the army. Right? He's the son of the founder of Mizrahi, and he went 3 months in the army, said that was a Yotzi for them. Life and culture is very interesting when you get to these situations. But in general, the Israeli government and the Israeli society will make the choice to retain the Sachnut, for better or worse. The real reason is not really so much to give jobs out, although that's very important. The real reason is the Jewish agency can do racist things that the Israeli government cannot do. I'll say it again. The Jewish agency can do racist things that the Israeli government cannot do. Israel cannot say we're going to have a policy to build houses only for Jews. They discriminate against the Arabs. And it's against the Israeli law. But the Jewish agency is a private business, and by definition, they're only interested in the Jewish people. So, who's in charge of the Aliyah? The Jewish agency. Who's in charge of the Klita? Jewish agency. Who builds the houses and decides where it should go? The Jewish agency. And so on and so forth. It's a heck of a way to run a country. We have two totally separate budgets, and they even had more. You can just imagine the graft, the corruption, the redundancy, and superfluity, and things like that. But that's part of that's the culture that we're dealing with over here. And these are the guys who will bring the Jews over. That's my point. The Israeli government does not have a ministry called the Ministry of Aliyah in those days. Instead, there's a Jewish agency with the Department of Aliyah, which is subject to the General Department of Yashvut, of Settlement. Let's go to the next one. He's the guy in charge of the Jewish agency, Levi Eshkol, who we all know became eventually the prime minister after Ben Gurion and so forth. Eshkol was the do-it man. He was given all the hard jobs, and he's given the job to run the whole settlement business, to build all these little towns and places along the border that I was talking about before, and figure out what to do when the refugees get here. And he's also in charge of the other side, but Yitzhak Raphael, the Mizrahi guy, the guy with the yarmulke, he's in charge of putting together the effort to bring everybody over. He's in charge of the Aliyah side. It's very interesting, and he was a big maximalist. That's who he was. Eshkol is in the Mapai party. That way they make sure that the main jobs go for their guys. But on the other hand, Yitzhak Raphael was able to turn the office of Aliyah into something real. He battles with the Mossad Aliyah Bet to take control of the organization. A lot of this kind of infighting. By the time it's over, coordinated, energetic moves stimulate large Aliyah. He's saying that's what it is. He's, I want all the guys to report to me. He goes around all of the countries, visiting them all the time. And as a result, as I say before, they bring in 250,000 people from Romania, Hungary, Poland, these sorts of things. It's not a small number. It's not 600,000, but it's not a small number. Okay, in these years. But wait a minute. It's 150 and 200. That's 400,000 stuff. I haven't even touched on the Sephardim. Right? We haven't touched on that. Which I'm going to do more quickly than necessary, but time is what it is. First of all, the Yemenites. The Teimanim, in the middle of 1949, they enjoy a romantic image in the eyes of the public. And Ben Gurion down, they all think the Yemenites, that's different than the Sephardim. And they are, I mean, if you want to be ethnically, but they're Mashu Miuchad, there's something Mashu Maksim, they have this naive faith. You all know the story that they're going to think that they're going on wings of eagles, right? We all heard these stories ever since we're kids, so I don't have to repeat them, but let's get them out. And so they do Operation Magic Carpet in 1949 and 50 over the space of 12 months. They bring out the Jews, 45,000 of them, accompanied, unfortunately, by many tragic mistakes and incompetencies on the part of the Aliyah staff in Aden. You see, Yemen is at the bottom of Arabia. Next door to it was the British colony of Aden, which today is a separate Arab country. They can't operate in Yemen, the Sakhnut, but they can operate in Aden, which is the British colony. The British allow them to do that. They send shlichim in. Actually, the Yemenite Jews don't have a radio. How do they even know Israel was founded? The local Arabs, after a week or two, tell them, your brothers, fellow Jews, have founded a country in Israel, and they're shechting our Arab brothers. So we're going to take revenge on you. That's the Jews don't even believe it. They send an emissary to Baghdad and to Tehran, nearby, relatively nearby. They say, is it true that they founded a Jewish country and all this? And you see, it's a very primitive part of the world. The Sakhnut says, the shlichim from the Mossad Aliyah, they go in there, or a lot of times they can't go. They bribe an Arab to go and bring them the news and bring them out. It's a very complex kind of story. They have to cross the border into Aden. It's not done well. It's hot desert. A lot of people die on the way, which didn't need to die. The older people are treated very badly. A lot of them die on the way. The staff here, it's a phenomenon. There's just a certain amount of racism. Nothing you can do about it. It's patronizing. They think we're doing them a favor, and they should be glad for everything we do. You know, it also happens later on when they end up kidnapping and stealing babies. It's not a pretty picture because it wasn't. And the Mapai party and those kind of guys pay a penalty in Israeli culture that to this day is resented. You understand? Because they don't forget what happened to them. As soon as they cross the border, they say, I guess all these people have illnesses, diseases, and things like this. So they all strip them and they give them, the delousing in a very dehumanizing way. They the staff over there, even though Yitzhak Raphael is from the Mepal Mizrahi, but most of the staff over there is from Hashomer Tzair and these types of youth groups. And immediately they tell the kids, cut your payas, get rid of your yarmulkes, have mixed dancing and all the rest of it, and to Judaize them in the proper way, which is to de-Judaize them, because all these all these Yemenite Jews are religious. You know, you don't need me to tell you, they're all payas. And so it's a very funny business. They can't take them by ship, so they have to fly them. And they fly them across Arabia, it's interesting, to Israel. Over the course of a year, they hire a private airliner to do it, and that's 45,000. Keep that number in your head. It is what it is. Then, in addition, you had the Jews in Iraq. Iraq had fought Israel in 48. Iraq never made peace with Israel. They didn't even sign an armistice with them. But at that time, it wasn't Saddam Hussein. Iraq, believe it or not, was a parliamentary democracy in those days, if you know the history of Iraq. Now, it's an Arab parliamentary democracy, so there's a lot of graft and corruption, this, that, and the other, as you have in the United States, but it was there was a parliament. And the head of the government at that time was Nuri Said, who was a famous politician who later on was killed by a mob. And Nuri Said, very pro-British, and he is interested in getting rid of the Jews. I mean, like that. In those years, I'll tell you what did not happen, and this is the most remarkable part of our story. The Arabs didn't all say, let's shecht all the Jews over here and not let a single one of them go to Israel in order not to reinforce the Zionists and take revenge on what happened to us. That's what I would have done. That's what they would do today. In those days, the Arab governments, especially like in Iraq, and places where they worry about what the West thinks about them, as they say, they were parliamentary democracies, they worry about their image, they said, let's get these Jews out of here, let them go to Israel, then we'll worry about the future. And so I'm oversimplifying because the thing happens in 1949, 1950, but I don't have the time to go into that in detail. Suffice it to say, in 1951, the Iraqi parliament, after the Sahnud got to this guy and that guy, the Iraqi parliament passed a law in which they say the Jews have a year to leave. If they leave, they could take, I don't know, $500, but they have to leave everything behind. They have to agree to give up their Iraqi citizenship, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of mistakes and messes on the way, but 120,000 Jews are eventually flown. The Iraqi government wants to get rid of them so much. First, they had to fly a roundabout route to Cyprus and then to Israel, and finally said, the heck with it. They just flew 70,000 of them straight across the border of Jordan. King Abdullah of Jordan said he could do it. Why? Because his wife persuaded him to do so. He had many wives. One of them was an African, and she had a hairdresser or something like this, and the Sahnud bribed the hairdresser. You understand? It's a, you know, could you make this up? Anyway, the same year, Libya, which was a British colony until now, was declared independent. As soon as the Jews freak out, they said, if Libya is under the British, is one thing. If it's going to be under the Arabs, and the Sahnud and Yitzhak Raphael, these guys go to Tripoli and Benghazi, all the places we recently read about in the paper, and they take all the Jews almost all the Jews out of Libya, and so it's 120 and 30,000. It's another 150,000 out of Iraq and Libya in 1951. You add all that up. You know, you're doubling the population of the country in 3 years. Okay? It's also true, by the way, that the Mossad al-Aliyabet, or we would call today what morphed into the Mossad, a lot of Iraqi Jews aren't interested in going, and so what they do is they put bombs in the synagogues. You understand? A couple of people even hurt. And the idea is like this: we want to freak out the Iraqi Jews to get out of here, and I'm doing you a favor. This is very controversial in Israel today. You can be sure many Palestinian propagandists use this. I can totally understand why. Mordechai ben Porat, if anybody's remember him, was the guy behind all these sorts of things. It was an Iraqi-Israeli who had made Aliyah to Israel in 1945, came back working for the Mossad Aliyah in 1950 and 51. And, you know, like I said before, they create anti-Semitic incidents to stimulate the Jews to leave the country. The counter-argument is, did you a favor, otherwise you would have stayed until Saddam Hussein, and then you'd really be in trouble, or something like that. Right? I mean, you know, it's not easy questions that I'm raising over here, but this is what really happened. Is what it is. 27,000 Jews from Iran they get, another 45 or so thousand Jews from Turkey, another 40,000 Jews from Egypt, Syria, Tunisia, Morocco. Here's a chart. I think this is fairly accurate. Count it all up, and what do you end up with? I don't even know myself. It's 100. I think this is a little bit less than what really is, but it's roughly correct. It's 100, 200, that's 300, 400, 500, and you add all this kind of stuff. It's close to 600,000, right? Isn't that right? Is it more? No, I'm talking about up to 52, up to here. Is that what you end up with? Yeah. So, aren't there any mathematicians in the audience, for crying out loud? But they're crazy numbers from the economic point of view. Would you agree with that? These are not numbers for say. And look what happened in 52. When Eliezer Kaplan said, this is impossible, we're crushing, we had to cut down the Aliyah totally. And they pretty much, this is not negligible, but it ain't like that. Agree? Right? It's a radical and drastic thing. And look at the next year, when it's 11,053. You see? They say, we can't do it. We'd like to do it. The economic reality caught up with the state of Israel in there. But on the other hand, they doubled the population. Correct? I mean, you see the numbers. They doubled the population from all over the place in an unplanned way, perhaps. No, there's nobody counted on this. This is not the right way it's supposed to be. Right way it's supposed to be is, we're taking 25,000 people a year for the next 100 years, and everything done at the right time and the right place. It's not like American Jews like you all making Aliyah now. You have nefesh b'nefesh, and you go with money already, and you already planned the place beforehand, and hopefully you can build something. And we're not talking about that, obviously, right? We're talking about a different set of dynamics. They pulled it off, but, and with this I conclude tonight, that's only half the story. Right? I've only told you the easy half. The easy half was to bring them over. Not that that was easy, but you know what I'm saying, compared to the other part. The other part is, what do you actually do when you have doubled the size of the country? Think about this. If the United States of America, which has 300 million people, took in very quickly 600,000 people, wouldn't be easy for us either. It can be done, I'm aware of that, but it'd be a major issue. Correct? You know, that's 500,000 people. If they had to take 500,000 people from Haiti, for example, or something like that. It's no small business. And that's the modern, powerful, and rich America. And now we're talking about something which is not modern, not powerful, not rich. And they're taking in 600,000. I get the idea about the Takab B'Shover Gadol Cheres, and I do. And I also get the argument, as people did at that time, that if you don't take them out now, maybe tomorrow they won't be able to get out. I totally understand that. But then there's the price to pay. But of course, that's not Ben Gurion's problem, that's Eliezer Kaplan's problem. And that's also going to be Eshkol's problem. In other words, and that's the Sochnut and the Israeli government. What do you do when you have 600,000 people over here and you don't have place for them to live, right? Or things like that. Then it gets very dicey. And that's what we'll talk about next week, which we're at Ner Tamid at 8 o'clock. Is that right? Is the calendar switching? What are we officially planning? Go. Yeah, I think next week is still 8:30, I believe. That's right. That's what we announced? Okay. Then next week, next week we'll be shooting. Okay, next week we'll be shooting for Ner Tamid at 8 o'clock. Good night.